Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to present in this seminar. This is a paper which is joined with Amat Adarov, who is at the prospect groups at the World Bank. And what we're doing here, we are developing a new index for investment quality. So I think this is the first contribution of the paper. And the second thing that we're doing, we are testing this index to see whether public investment of different quality has an effect on sovereign risk. So just as a motivation, the way we measure public investment is just by the amount of money that is spent in a given project. But different type of expenditure might lead to a public investment project with very different value. So the story that I like to say, imagine a 100-kilometer road which connects an industrial city to a port. This is a public investment project which might have a very high return. Or imagine a 100-kilometer road which is connecting the capital of a country to the town where the mother of an important politician was born. This will make the commute of the important politician to see his mother easier, but it will probably not have a large effect on the GDP of that country. So these are two investment projects which would be classified as being the same in national account, but again with very different impact on economic growth and on fiscal sustainability. So we might think about white elephant projects and all sorts of projects which are poorly done because of corruption or lack of ability or whatever. And so we want to measure, build a measure of the quality of public investment project. And then after we're done with this, we want to check whether this is important for fiscal sustainability. And again, you can think that there are at least two elements through which the quality of public investment may affect fiscal sustainability. Number one, when we spend money for public investment, there is just a demand effect in the short run. This might have a positive effect on output growth. But if the investment is of good quality, will also increase the capital stock of the country and also lead to higher growth in the long run. So there is a direct growth effect, which will not be there if the investment is of poor quality. And then there is a fiscal channel. Of course, when we spend the money for the investment project, we'll be running, we'll be running a deficit or running a lower surplus. So this is bad in the short run. But it could be even worse in the long run if the public investment is of poor quality, because then we'll have to spend a lot of money maintaining it and so on and so forth. So that's the issue. So that's why we think it's interesting. There is some literature related to this, but I'll skip it. We can get back to this if there is some interest later on. So this is the outline of the talk. I will spend some time describing how we measure our index of public investment quality. Then, after describing how we build the index, I would spend just a few minutes to describe the index itself, what do the data say, and comparing it with other measures that have been proposed in the past and with measures of institutional quality. And finally, I will look at whether public investment quality has an implication for sovereign risk and debt sustainability. So let me start with the first part. So how we we build this new public investment quality index. We call it PIC. How do we do that? So for each investment project which is financed by the World Bank, the independent evaluation group of the World Bank does an ex post evaluation and gives a rating to the quality of this project. And this rating goes from 1, saying that the project was very bad, 2, pretty bad, 3, so and so, 4, okay, 5, good, and 6, very good. So we have these numbers that go from 1 to 6 that tell us the quality of this project. And the good thing about this is that this evaluation is done by an independent group and is done in a fully uniform way across many projects and across many countries. Now, there are many factors that might affect this score. Some projects might be more difficult than others. Some teams at the World Bank might be better than others, and so on and so forth. Larger project might be more difficult to manage than smaller projects. But what we do, we get all these ratings together. We estimate a model that controls for all factors which might affect the quality of a project. And then we recover the residual of the statistical model, and we average the residual for each country that we have in our data set. And we think that this residual is what is left of the determinants of the quality of the project, which is not determined by World Bank factor. And so it's some country level measure of the quality of all the investment projects financed by the World Bank in a given country. We do this in different ways. I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute. So we compute an index, which is just an average for the period 2021. That's when we have data on these ratings. But then we also do a dynamic version of the project in which we have 10 years rolling window estimate. So we'll have the value for the period 2000-2010, then the value for the period 2001-2011, and so on and so forth. So we'll have a time varying measure. We also do the same thing for a 5-year window. Now, there is a trade-off here because as we narrow the window, we get something good. So we get some dynamic variation, but we get less and less projects. So the estimation becomes less precise. So that's what I told you. So we have these measures of the quality of the project, which are for a given project, that's I, in a given sector, in a given country, in a given time. And then we control for a bunch of project level characteristics, the length, the volume, the agreement type, the quality at entry, the quality of supervision. And then we have some, basically we capture just for the macro cycle, which may affect this. And then we have sector fixed effect, we have time fixed effect, and then what is left is the residual, and this residual is what we average by country or by country time to measure this quality of public investment. So that's exactly what we do. We do this in many different ways to test the robustness of our sample, but what we use in the baseline is the first column of this table, in which we do a pooled OLS model. Again, the dependent variable is this index measuring the quality of a given project, and we regress it on real GDP growth, control for the business cycle, real GDP per capita in logs, control for the level of development. The results are robust to dropping this. The length of the project, so you see longer projects have more quality. The volume, larger projects vis-a-vis smaller projects, as you can see, larger projects tend to have higher quality. The quality at entry, projects which have a higher evaluation at the beginning tend to be better, and the quality of the World Bank supervisor, and also here supervisor which have higher quality of supervision leads to better project. And then, as I said, we take the residual and we compute this quality of investment index. We do this with fixed effect. We do this over different periods. We do this with order probit. We do this with order probit fixed effect. We do this with order logit. Whichever way we do it, we get pretty much the same result. For a subset of projects, we also have the quality of the task team leader. So that's the person who manages the project at the World Bank. We don't use this in the baseline because we only have it for a subset of projects. But basically, this graph shows the correlation between our baseline estimates and the estimates that we get when we also control for the task team leader quality. And as you can see, these two variables are highly correlated. So we don't think that this is an issue. And we do many different things. So we drop, so remember our index is an aggregate, it's an average of this residual at the country level. So we drop all country year for which we don't have at least 8 projects. We play a little bit with this threshold, we get the same result. We do alternative estimation window for a time varying index. We play with the control, and as I said, we use different estimation framework, and again, the results are more or less the same. So what does the data say? I'm going to show you now quickly some correlation between our measure of public investment quality and different measures of institutional quality and also public investment management that have been used in the past. I forgot to say that so far there is only one public available measure of public investment quality, and it's the Public Investment Management Index, the PIMI, that was computed around 2007 and 2010 by a team led by Era Dabla-Norris at the IMF. This is a great index, but it has 2 problems. One problem is that it is a de jure index. So it's an index which is built by asking people about the procedure that led to the public investment decision. So it's more an index about the rule book than an index about the outcome of the public investment process, which is what we have. But the second problem, which is an even more important problem, there is a problem which is based on a massive survey which has been done across many countries. So it's an incredibly complicated and costly project, which is very difficult to replicate and update. Well, our methodology, everybody can do it. All the data are publicly available and can be constantly updated. As the World Bank puts out on its website new measures on this index, we actually can update our data set, and anybody can do it. So that's the key thing. So let me just show you this. This is the correlation between our index on the vertical axis and 3 measures that are standardly used to measure institutional quality. On this graph, we have the correlation between our index and the ICRG investment profile. So you can see they're highly correlated. This is with the time invariant index. So, and here we're averaging over 2020-21, both variables. Here we have with the dynamic index, so we let the index change every year between 2010 and 2021. But again with the investment profile index, and this is the correlation with the ICRG corruption index. Also highly correlated with the World Global Indicator of Regulatory Quality, with the country policy investment profile of public sector management. And interesting, the correlation is not very high, and here I'm at this graph, with the Public Investment Management Index, which I mentioned before. Why we think that this correlation is not very high, it has to do with the temporal dimension. As I mentioned, this index, the Public Investment Management Index, was built using data for around 2006, 2007, 2009, 2006, 2009, while our index spans a much larger number of years. In fact, if we use the time-varying dimension of our index and we look at the correlation with the PIMI index, which are this graph, you see that the correlation is higher at the beginning of the sample when we are looking. So each point here is the correlation between the PIMI index and our index. So you see that when we have the 2010 period, and that means that our index is computed over 2000 and 2010, so an overlap with the period in which the PIMI index was computed, the correlation is positive and statistically significant. But then the correlation goes to zero as we update our index, because we're still comparing it with a PIMI index, which was for 10 years before that. While the other variables, which are also time varying, the correlation remains more or less constant. Okay, now I told you something about how we build the index. And what I'm going to tell you now is the last part. That is, we're going to see whether this measure that we built, this measure of public investment quality, can tell us something about the relationship between the level of public investment and sovereign risk. So let me move to this part. So here our empirical strategy is the following. We have a set of regressions in which the dependent variable is a measure of sovereign risk. And we use three measures of sovereign risk. One is the 5-year CDS credit default swap spread. So higher, more risk. The second is just a variable, the sovereign credit ratings, which takes a higher value when the rating is lower. So again, higher number means more sovereign risk. So in this case, a AAA country will have a value of 1, and a country which is at default will have a value of 17, 18. Or the MB spread, which is again higher value, is more risk. So that's our dependent variable. Then we regress it on public investment as a share of GDP. This is this variable. So this is the main effect of public investment or sovereign risk. And then, and that's our variable of interest, we interact public investment as a share of GDP with our measure of public investment quality. Of course, we also control for public investment quality and a bunch of other variables which affect sovereign risk, and for a bunch of fixed effects. Now, our coefficient of interest is gamma, which tells us how the relationship between public investment and sovereign risk varies with the quality of public investment. We expect that when the quality of public investment is higher, higher public investment will reduce sovereign risk. And when the quality of public investment is low, we expect that higher public investment will increase sovereign risk. So we expect, in other words, gamma to be negative. So that's what we're going to test. And these are our regressions. So what our regression telling us, remember that what we care about is this index, is this interactive effect, so the interaction between our index of public investment and public investment as a share of GDP. And we find that this interactive effect is always negative and statistically significant, whether we use the time invariant measure of public investment quality or whether we use the time variant measure of public investment quality. We also find that the main effect of public investment is negative and statistically significant in the baseline. It's negative, but not always significant when we do different things. And so is the measure of public investment quality. So what does this tell us? This tells us that for the country with the average quality of public investment, with the average level of public investment quality, more public investment reduces, in this case, CDS spread. This one tells us for the country with the average level of public investment, more public investment quality reduces CDS spreads. But more interesting, this tells us that when public investment goes up, sovereign spread go down more, the higher is the quality of public investment. We get this result when we use CDS spreads. We use this get result when we use sovereign ratings. Now, I know that understanding interactive effects is always a bit complicated, so I'm going to show you a bunch of graphs. So these are the graphs that summarize the results that I said before. So what we have on the let's consider, for instance, the first graph. So here, dependent variable. So this is the first column of the previous table. What do we see here? We see that when, so the average value of the public investment quality index is about 0. It's at 0.06. So we see that when we're at the average value, this on the vertical axis, we have how sovereign risk respond to an increase in public investment. So we see that when public investment quality is at its average value, an increase in public investment has a small negative effect on sovereign risk. So it reduces sovereign risk, which is good. We also see that as the quality of public investment increases, so when we are at the maximum of the public investment quality index, there is a unit increase in public investment has a very large effect, 30 basis point, a very large effect on the reduction on CDS. And on the other hand, when the investment of public investment quality is low, so here we get exactly the opposite effect. That is that increase in public investment actually leads to an increase in spread, leads to an increase in sovereign risk. This is exactly the idea. Is a country which basically is wasting the money, is building very bad public investment projects, and so, you know, since we're investing, we're just wasting the money. The public investment is not going to be good for growth, and it's just an additional fiscal cost. And we get the same result if we use sovereign ratings. How long should I talk for?
We have time, Professor Panizza.
Sorry?
We have enough time.
Okay.
Maybe another 15 minutes.
Okay, very good. So then we do a bunch of robustness checks. This graph, my co-author taught me about this graph, so it's pretty cool. So let me tell you about it. So this graph kind of shows a three-dimensional effect. So when you see going towards orange or red, it means that in this case, sovereign risk is going up. And when you go towards blue, you see that sovereign risk is going to go down. So there are many ways to read this graph. You can read it vertically or horizontally. So let me start by reading it vertically. So this is on the horizontal axis, we have public investment quality. Remember that the average is about 0, 0.4 is high quality, minus 0.4 is low quality. And here on the vertical axis, we have public investment over GDP between 0 and 20%. So if we are in the middle of the public investment quality, as we increase public investment, you see nothing happens to this color. We remain green. So nothing much happens here. However, if we are on this side, on the On the high level of investment quality, so on the right side of the graph, you see that as we go up, we move from green to blue. That means that the spreads are decreasing from 4 to basically 0. So high investment quality, as we increase investment, spreads go up. Quite the opposite if we are on the other side of the graph where public investment quality is low. As we move up the graph, as public investment increases, spreads are actually increasing. We can also read the graph horizontally. If we basically have no public investment, so if we're at the bottom of the graph, as we move from the left to the right, nothing is happening to spread, because if you don't have public investment, the quality of public investment doesn't really matter. You don't have any. But if you have very high level of public investment, so if you're in the top of the graph, when you move from left to right, you see that you're going from very high spread when you have low investment quality to low spread when you have high investment quality. And this is the same thing for the sovereign rating. We do other thing with region and country fixed effects. So I'll skip this. So as you can see, the results are similar. What is interesting and is the experiment I'm going to show it to you now. Now, you might think, imagine two countries. One country, the country like the country where I live now, which is Switzerland, and which is a country, with basically no debt sustainability issues, with AAA rating, with very low borrowing cost, and a country which is at higher risk of default. Imagine Egypt. So Egypt is a country which is facing a very high spread. Now, you may think that if Switzerland wastes some money, it's not a big tragedy, because anyway, the situation is so strong that, it's nothing much would happen to the sovereign risk of Switzerland. However, things are much more critical if Egypt, which is already in a weaker position, wastes some money. So what we do now, we're going to split countries in two groups. Countries which have limited risk of debt distress, so countries which are investment grade, and countries which are at high risk of debt distress, so these are countries which are sub-investment grade. And our expectation is that this relationship between the quality of public investment and investment levels, how this interaction between the quality of public investment and investment level affects spreads, should show up in countries with sub-investment grade ratings, and should not matter much in countries with investment grade ratings. So these are countries with investment grade, and these are countries without investment grade, and I'm going to just show you the graph. It's easier. So these are the graph for investment grade countries. So you see, as the quality of investment changes, we see almost no effect on the sensitivity of sovereign spread to the level of public investment. Here, it really doesn't matter. However, for non-investment grade countries, we get our strong result that we got before. So, and this is whether we use the fixed public investment quality index or we use the dynamic public investment quality index. So this corroborates our idea that investing well is particularly important when you are already at risk of debt distress, or when you have actually fiscal problems. So that's our first set of results. So far, what did we do? We did two things. We built an index that measured the quality of public investment. That's the first thing. And the second thing, we showed that this index is associated, this index affect the way in which the level of public investment affects sovereign risk. And specifically in countries with high public investment quality, higher level of public investment actually reduce sovereign spreads. And the opposite is true in countries in which public investment is poor quality. Now, this should, another way to look at this problem is that we should find that in countries with good public investment quality, an increase in public investment over time should reduce the debt to GDP ratio. Why? Because, it's true that I'm investing, so this will require debt financing, and this should push for a higher level of debt. But since the investment is good, this should then stimulate growth. And if the stimulus of growth is high enough, actually the debt to GDP ratio should go down. The opposite should be true for countries with low quality of public investment. In this case, we spend the money, but we get nothing in terms of growth, so the situation is going to get worse. So we test this idea, estimating a bunch of local projection models in which the dependent variable is the change in the debt to GDP ratio over different periods. And we have a bunch of controls, and the main explanatory variable is the investment over GDP, the public investment over GDP ratio. And to do a strike comparison, we estimate this model for two subgroups of countries. Countries in which the public investment quality index is one standard deviation above the average. So these are high quality of investment countries. And countries where the public investment index is one standard deviation shown below the cross-country average. And then we plot these local projections. So the results, so we do this in three different ways. What we have here in panel A, we have a model in which we don't take endogeneity seriously. So basically, we just run this regression, assuming that everything is exogenous. And what do we find? We find that in high investment quality countries, impulse to public investment as a negative, not statistically significant, but a negative impact on the debt to GDP of the country. So we can invest. So the investment kind of pays for itself. We increase public investment, debt doesn't go up. But the opposite is true in the low public investment quality sample, where over time, after we invest more, over time, the debt to GDP ratio goes up. Now, as I mentioned, here, we don't really deal with endogeneity. So in the next set of results, which is the two panel B here, what do? We first run a VAR regression in which we have the level of public investment and GDP growth. We use the Blanchard and Perotti approach to identify this VAR. We recover the shock of the VAR, and we use the shock of this VAR as an instrument for public investment in the local projections. When we do this, we find that in countries with high public investment quality, an increase in, so this is the left panel here, we find that an increase in public investment reduces the debt to GDP ratio in high investment quality countries, while in countries with low public investment quality, actually the thing is not statistically significant, and over time it goes up. We also try with one different identification strategy. The results are here. They're pretty much the same. So I will conclude, and then I'm happy to take questions. Just to summarize, we propose a new measure of public investment quality, which is based on publicly available data that can be computed by anybody or can be modified if people don't like our system. So I think one of the contributions of the paper is exactly to propose this methodology that anybody can use or modify whichever way they want to measure public investment quality. We show that this measure of public investment quality is important for the relationship between public investment and sovereign risk, or public investment and the evolution of the debt-to-GDP ratio. So I guess I don't have to explain why this is important, but I'm going to say it anyway. We have a massive, many countries face a massive infrastructure gap. They need to scale up public investment. Many countries also have limited fiscal space, and this constraint to fiscal space limit their ability to invest. However, if these countries were able to increase the quality of their public investment, they could fill the infrastructure gap without negative effects on fiscal sustainability. So I will close my presentation here, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Panizar, for a fascinating presentation. And this measure based on the World Bank's this project performance database, I mean, that is, it really sheds light in terms of how quality of investment actually matters, not just the quantity. So we'll take questions from the audience, and the audience can actually type the questions in the chat window, and we can either take the audience online, or I can read out the questions. But just to start off with, I think one question, the findings are very intuitive, that quality matters for debt sustainability, for fiscal balances. How can countries raise the quality of their public investment? I mean, do you have any recommendations for, let's say, sub-investment grade countries, particularly in terms of the policies that they can implement to?
So this is not really the objective of the paper, in a sense. So our paper was more to find a measure and evaluate this. I mean, I guess it's too bad that my co-author is not here, because I think the World Bank does indeed have a lot of programs and technical assistance programs which are really linked to improving the quality of investment. Now, one thing that I know has shown to work in the past is transparency helps a lot. When good data on how the money is collected and how the money is spent, and there are proper evaluation, this can actually help improving the allocation of money. I'm tempted to tell a joke about an Italian politician, but I will tell you later if there's space.
Thank you for that. So there are some questions in terms of from the audience on the measure of sovereign rating that has been used, whether it's the actual rating, a numeric equivalent of the rating, or the record of sovereign defaults.
No, this is really the numerical equivalent of the rating. So basically, we use Standard & Poor's as baseline, but not all countries have data from Standard & Poor's. So if a country doesn't have data from Standard & Poor's, we use Fitch or Moody's. Well, we use Standard & Poor's, then Fitch, then Moody's. No, let me say it again. We use Standard & Poor's, then Moody's, and then Fitch, and basically we assigned numbers to the rating. So, for instance, countries which are rated AAA by S&P or Fitch, or A big, too small A, so that the highest rating by Moody's, we gave them a score of 1, and countries which are rated as C by Fitch and Standard & Poor's, or D, which is default, we gave them a score of 21. So the number really ranges between 1 and 21, in which 11 is the threshold between investment grade and speculative. So when we split the sample between investment grade and speculative, we split the sample with the country above and 11 in our rating scale.
Thank you. So we have another question, which is, I think, an expected one, about India's status in terms of public investment quality. And India is just above the investment grade threshold. It's a BBB minus rated country.
Like Italy.
I'm sorry, yes. So could you shed some light on the quality of investment in India?
So look, this is a question that many people asked, not about India, about the country. So as I mentioned before, everybody can reproduce our results. However, since one of my co-authors work at the World Bank, in order to publish or mention data which are specific to a country, we need all sorts of clearance. So that's something, again, you can actually do on the website of the World Bank, run a regression and get this number. But I cannot officially do it because it would put my colleague into trouble, just because, all big organizations have rules. So that's why we didn't put this thing. But again, there is nothing secretive. Everybody can do it. It's just a procedural issue.
Right. No, we fully understand. So I think we have some more questions from the audience. Is there any example of a bad quality public investment? Is it possible to identify it beforehand?
I mean, there are many examples of bad quality public investment. I mean, so whether to identify it beforehand or not, I mean, not in this data. With our data, these are all ex post evaluation, clearly. So if you want to, in some cases are self-evident. You see buildings which are built in a bad way, you see roads which are built in a bad way. So I think there are two ways to assess ex ante whether a public investment is of good or poor quality. The first thing is the example I used at the beginning. Does the investment make sense? So again, I use this example of building a road that connects a city, an industrial city, to a port. So this is an investment that probably makes sense, right? Because you want this thing to be connected to a port. While maybe building a road that connects the capital to, the town of the grandmother of the famous politician makes less ex ante. So that's one way. So does the project make sense in itself? So that's one level in which a project could be good or bad. The other one is how you do it. I mean, maybe you build the road to the port city with, in a way that it's going to get destroyed the first time it rains. So then the project would make sense, but it's still a bad project because you did a poor job. When you think about the road to the, grandmother of the politician, there maybe you build a beautiful road, but it's still wasted money because, maybe only the famous politician will use the road. So I think there are two ways you want to evaluate this thing. Number one, does the project make sense? Number two, was the project well done? Now, my impression, I mean, my understanding of the data that we're using focuses more on the second part, because again, these are only World Bank projects, right? So before the project is financed, the project goes through some sort of approval state. So you might think that the World Bank would not approve a project to connect the capital city to the grandmother of the politician. I mean, everything is possible, but it's less likely, right? So my understanding that the quality of the projects here is much more linked to how the project is implemented rather than the project made sense or not.
Right, right. No, thank you for that. One other question is, I mean, when we are looking at debt sustainability, the type of debt also matters. If it's, let's say, concessional debt from official creditors, let's say the World Bank is giving loans at, let's say, 1% interest rate for a 40-year period, versus a loan, let's say, from a private creditor, or let's say from some country which is charging the market interest rate and has a shorter maturity period. So the type of debt might also matter in terms of financing these projects. Would you care to share your views on this?
Yeah, you're 100% right. So you know, there is a large literature that shows that debt composition matter as much as debt levels. So again, here the paper doesn't have much to say about this. The only thing that I can say that in some of our regression we control for country fixed effect, so we're implicitly controlling for that structure because that's kind of. But you know, you're 100% right that there are many factors that affect sovereign risk, and that composition is clearly one of these factors. That's not something that we include of this paper, but I wrote many papers about original sin and that is the foreign currency composition of that and how this affects sovereign risk. So that's, but it's not something that we deal with in this paper.
Thank you. There's one question from the audience on is considering ESG important while investing, environmental sustainability and governance issues.
It is, yes, it's definitely important. Again, I think that given the precise setting of this paper, this is not something which really would show up in our data for the reason that I mentioned before, because all the consideration of whether this should be an investment that should be done in our data set are done before the investment is undertaken. Then the evaluation of the World Bank Independent Evaluation Office is more whether the investment is done as it should have been done. So in a sense, if the investment was a polluting coal plant and the polluting coal plant is produced well, then this will get a high score, even though maybe we think that should not have been a good idea to pollute it. But that's a different issue. So it's definitely important, and it's getting more and more important. But that's not something that our index would probably capture.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think there is someone who is Divya. I think she has asked about blended finance. How is it a reliable investment option for private and public investors?
So blended finance is more of a way to promote private investment rather than public investment. So the idea of blended finance is that we're mixing public and private resources, but which is then channeled to the private sector. So again, blended finance works well for certain projects. It works less well for other projects, but it's not so much a tool to finance public investment, but a tool to finance private investment. So even if you think about the division of most project development, the IBRD or IDA, which are the public sector arm of the World Bank, while blended finance is more used by the IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank. A lot about the World Bank. I don't work for the World Bank, so maybe my colleagues where I would say these things, so don't blame.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Paniza, for sharing your very recent paper with us and for taking time out to address the audience in India and other countries as well. So I think we don't have any other questions from the audience. So I think we can conclude the session. And we're all very appreciative of you giving time for this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.